Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back into ancient Rome. Not the Rome of emperors and epic battles, but the Rome you could smell before you even saw it. The Rome where laundry was stomped with bare feet and public toilets involved way too much shared sponge activity. That's right. You're waking up not in a palace, but in a third-floor room in a noisy insula, with cracked plaster walls and a pigeon eyeing you through the window. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment below where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I love seeing this little community stretch across the globe like the Empire once did. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you hear isn't birdsong. It's a cartwheel squeaking below your window, followed by someone arguing over figs. You open your eyes to dusty beams of golden light pushing through the wooden slats, brushing against the uneven floorboards of your tiny Roman room. You've slept under a blanket that smells faintly of olive oil and clay dust, and there's a dull thud below. Maybe the baker dropping his firewood, or maybe the landlord chasing a goat again. It's early, but in Rome, early is a social construct negotiated by whoever shouts first. You rise and shuffle to the small clay jug near your bed. The water inside is lukewarm, and it's been sitting since yesterday, but it'll do for splashing your face. Outside your window, rooftops layer themselves like broken tiles over the waking city, smoke already rising from the bread ovens. The Tiber hums faintly in the distance, a kind of slow, stone-colored heartbeat of the city. You pull on a tunic that's been worn, reworn, and, if you're being honest, could use a little stomp cleaning at the Filonica. There's a single slice of yesterday's cheese left, but your stomach votes for something warm and bready, so you push open the creaky wooden door, step out into the stairwell, and begin the slow descent. Your building is an insula, one of Rome's many tenement-style apartments. Built high, often with dubious attention to architecture, it smells permanently of stew, feet, and wet plaster. You pass a sleepy neighbor trying to convince her child to eat boiled barley. You offer a polite nod. She grunts in a dialect you're not fluent in, but that sounds like, "Good luck out there." At the bottom of the stairs, you're nearly trampled by a boy running full speed with a basket of dates, chased by an older man yelling, "That's not even your grandmother." This makes no sense, but you're still waking up. The street smells like hot stone, donkey, and the sharp twang of fresh urine. You step over a broken amphora, sidestep a dog who looks deeply unimpressed by your presence, and finally, you're in the morning Rome that the travel scrolls don't describe. Historians still debate whether the average Roman day truly began at sunrise, or if this was more of a poetic generalization, since some people were already elbow-deep in fish guts by then, and others, like the Senate, didn't really show up for anything until after breakfast. What we do know is that bread lines formed early, and that's exactly where you're heading. As you walk, you pass a woman hawking what she swears are imported Gaulish apples, though one of them has a worm chewing confidently through its core. A few stalls are setting up with cheap trinkets, bronze rings, painted figurines of gods who probably aren't on duty this early, and even tiny carved chickens, which seem like a marketing experiment. You overhear two men in their 30s complaining about how grain from Sicily used to mean something. They argue about the taste of barley versus wheat like philosophers, tossing in metaphors about war, women, and a particularly rude duck they both remember from their childhood. It's all very Roman, deeply passionate and vaguely edible. You finally reach the bread shop, and the line is already halfway down the street. The smell, though, the smell makes the wait worth it. Warm, nutty loaves emerge from the clay oven, steam curling like lazy scrolls into the air. You consider asking for 2 loaves, but realize your coin pouch feels suspiciously light. You do the mental math: 1 loaf, 1 olive, or 1 candle stub. A true Roman breakfast of champions. The man behind the counter has flour on his nose and the eyes of someone who has seen far too many early mornings. He asks your name, though you've come here for weeks. This may be a subtle insult or just bad memory. You get your bread and move aside, chewing the crust as you stroll. You make your way toward a fountain to sit, the sound of water trickling from the spout into the worn stone basin, acting like a morning lullaby. A boy next to you tosses a pebble in and whispers a wish. You think about doing the same, but then remember your last wish was for a slightly more balanced tunic hem, which did not come true. As you sit, a soft breeze carries the scent of rosemary and wet marble. You hear the distant bleating of a goat, possibly the same one from your building, and laugh to yourself. A fringe tidbit often overlooked. Some Romans believed that washing one's face in fountain water while saying the name of a household god backward could bring you luck for the day. It never worked, obviously, but the tradition lingered. You consider whispering Janus in reverse, but realize Sunaj sounds like a perfume. And so, you start your day in the empire, not with triumph or tragedy, but with chewy bread, overheard fruit gossip, and the slow realization that the man behind you in line may have been a senator or a mime. In Rome, the line between the two was often blurry. As the sun stretches higher and the sounds of the city rise, smiths hammering, children playing, vendors shouting, one thing becomes clear. Life in Rome doesn't rush. It ambles, it gossips, it spills wine on its toga and blames the gods. You take another bite of your bread and stretch your legs. It's going to be a long, strange, beautiful day, and you're only just getting started. You stand up from the fountain, brushing crumbs from your tunic, and let the sun guide you toward the heart of the city. Your feet know the forum before your eyes do. The air thickens with voices, with smoke from grilled onions, with the faintest perfume of trampled laurel. And then it unfolds. The Roman Forum, wide and humming with the clutter of daily ambition. Not the postcard version with shining marble and statues that sparkle. No, the real Forum smells like damp wool, boiling cabbage, and overused sandals. As you walk, every stone underfoot carries the wear of thousands before you. The clack of sandals, the creak of carts, the slap of wet cloth against stone walls. It's all part of the chorus. And over that soundtrack, someone is loudly announcing a philosophy class. Another is selling love potions, certified by Venus herself. And somewhere in the crowd, a man with an extremely large nose is declaring the latest bread prices as if they're scandalous. You hear your name. Or at least someone shouting something close to your name. You turn, but the caller is actually beckoning a dog. The dog doesn't respond. Instead, it sniffs a broken tile and then trots away toward the temple steps, possibly to urinate on something sacred. Your stomach makes a quiet plea. 1 loaf of bread wasn't enough. You decide to make your way toward one of the early morning food vendors. A woman named Aurelia has a stall just beside the temple of Castor and Pollux. And if you're lucky, she'll still have honeyed millet cakes and not just the burned bottoms. Her family has run the stall since, as she likes to say, before the gods could shave. As you approach, she greets you without looking up, saying, "You're late. I saved you the least burnt one." You thank her and bite into the cake. It's still warm, sticky in the best way, and tastes like breakfast if breakfast had been invented as a bribe. Aurelia wipes her hands on her apron and leans in. "Did you hear what happened last night?" You pause, crumbs clinging to your chin. "The snake again?" "No," she says. "Better. Tullius the fishmonger got caught swapping eel tags." You blink. She nods, lips curling. Labeled them imported, but they were from the canal. Canal eels. People are furious. One woman said she hallucinated Neptune after dinner. You laugh and thank her for the cake, promising to bring her figs next week, which you won't. You never remember figs. This sort of gossip is the lifeblood of the forum. It travels faster than the Imperial Courier Service, faster than the pigeons with scrolls tied to their legs, though scholars still debate how often that last method was actually used. Some say pigeons were just decoration. Others claim they were essential for military dispatches. The truth, like many things Roman, is probably somewhere between strategy and showmanship. You keep walking. A man brushes past you with an armful of scrolls, muttering legal jargon. Behind him, two teenage boys are trying to sell what they swear is a genuine sandal of Emperor Augustus. One of them whispers, "He wore it while napping." The other adds, "It still smells faintly of empire." You do not buy the sandal. Instead, your attention turns to a long line near the Curia. A magistrate is giving out grain allotments today. The people in line look both hopeful and resigned, two expressions Romans have perfected over centuries of bureaucracy. You join the edge of the crowd, not for grain, but because crowds are always watching something. And today, it's a duo of street performers juggling clay cups while reciting rude poetry about provincial governors. The crowd roars with laughter at a rhyme involving Gaulish cheese and a centurion's unfortunate rash. You chuckle too, and for a moment, time slows. The way the sun slices through the colonnades, the blend of satire and street dust, the kid nearby trying to balance a chicken on his head, it's a strange, chaotic harmony. One fringe detail that surprises modern historians: Romans loved queuing. Not because they enjoyed waiting, but because it gave them a chance to socialize, complain, and speculate wildly about imperial policies. The line was where politics, personal grievances, and bread availability all mingled into one noisy soup. You make your way toward the Basilica Julia, where a group of clerks are already deep into legal debates. You can't understand half of it, but the passion is entertaining. One man insists the penalty for stealing olives should differ based on whether they were plucked from a private tree or one spiritually belonging to Mars. The other responds, "Mars doesn't need olives," which sparks a philosophical detour you weren't prepared for. Historians still debate the true role of these legal gatherings, whether they were intended for the educated elite only, or if the average citizen participated more often than the dusty scrolls suggest. Some argue that everyday Romans shaped law just by shouting about it often enough in public. Others think it was mostly posturing. Either way, today it sounds a lot like dinner with in-laws. You slip away from the debate and take a seat on a wide step near the edge of the forum. From here, you can see it all. The columns reaching into the sky like stone trees, the marble facade still showing faded paint, the patchwork of sandals and footprints pressing patterns into the dust. Nearby, a little boy pretends to be a consul, issuing commands to a very tolerant chicken. His mother watches, amused, and tells him, If you can get the chicken to vote, you can be emperor. It's the kind of moment Rome is made of. Not conquests or edicts, but chickens, children, and mildly flammable philosophy debates. You lean back against the warm stone and close your eyes just for a second. The voices blend into background texture, like waves against a very bureaucratic shore. Somewhere a man is singing badly. Somewhere else, a woman is listing the virtues of different olive varieties. Your breath slows. Rome pulses around you, not like a loud drum, but like a murmured memory. It doesn't demand your attention. It simply includes you. You open your eyes again and realize the bread line has finally emptied, the magistrate has moved on, and Aurelia's stall is now being swarmed by bees. It's probably time to wander again. But you're in no rush. This city, like the Tiber, flows at its own sleepy, slightly chaotic pace. And you, like the figless poet you are learning to drift with it. You turn away from the hum of the forum, wiping your hands on your tunic, still slightly sticky from Aurelia's honey cake, and set off down a quieter street that slopes gently toward the Aventine. It's mid-morning now, and the sun has started to warm the stone under your feet, giving the city that toasted clay smell Rome wears so well. To your left, a man is loudly debating with his parrot. The parrot wins. To your right, a girl is jumping rope with braided straw while singing a song about Emperor Claudius's favorite mushrooms. Historically questionable, but catchy. You're headed towards something most tourists and a fair number of Romans try to avoid talking about: the public toilets. You round the corner and there it is, the Foraca, tucked modestly behind a row of olive sellers and a suspiciously quiet barber shop. From the outside, it's simple. Low walls, worn steps, and a roof that sags just slightly, like it's embarrassed to be here. Inside, though, it's the social club of the street. You duck in, the air smells exactly how you'd expect. Damp stone, old water, a faint perfume of herbs trying their best to compete. You take a seat. No doors, of course. Just a carved opening on a long, continuous bench with other equally resigned citizens doing their business. One man beside you sighs and says, "Well, better than home. At least here there's conversation." Another nods solemnly. And a sponge stick that isn't frozen. You blink. Sponge stick? Yes, there it is. Tersorium, resting peacefully in a shallow water channel in front of the seats. A communal sponge on a stick, rinsed between uses. Supposedly. You quietly decide to pretend it's just for display. Historians often note the impressive engineering of Roman sanitation systems. Underground sewage tunnels, sophisticated aqueducts, gravity-fed waste management. Rome did it all. But what they talk about less is the chatty intimacy of these shared moments. Romans didn't see privacy the same way modern folks do. A bathroom was just another place to swap gossip, argue politics, and occasionally recite poetry about figs. A man leans toward you conspiratorially. "Did you hear they're naming a street after that general who tripped on his own sword during training?" "No," you say, unsure if this is a joke. "Oh, yes," he says, nodding. "Via Fortunata Stumblis." It's a lie. Almost definitely. But again, Rome. A few moments later, a group of boys dash in, throw a handful of chickpeas into someone's lap, and run out cackling. No one flinches. It's just Tuesday. After your visit, you wash your hands, thank the gods for the little spout fed by an aqueduct stream, and step outside again, back into the brightness. You walk slowly now, passing kids playing nuts, the Roman version of marbles, but with walnuts instead. Two girls argue fiercely over whether one of them cheated by invoking Mercury's luck. You pause to watch. One girl slams her walnut into the other's, sends it tumbling against a crack in the road, and declares, "That's for stealing my hairpin last week." Justice, clearly, is alive and well in miniature Rome. You smile and keep moving. Next, you turn down a narrow alley, flanked by high brick walls. Subura territory now. Once infamous, now mostly lively. You pass a wine shop where the barrels look like they've been there since Neptune's birthday. Above you, laundry stretches like prayer flags between windows, tunics swaying gently in the breeze. A street musician plays a panpipe, not well, but with enough charm to earn a few coins and one shoe. You briefly wonder if he lost the other one in a duel, or traded it for cheese. Rome is rich with mysteries. As you pass a doorway, a woman calls out, "Looking for a philosopher?" You raise an eyebrow. She points inside. "My brother. Won't stop talking about Socrates. Been 2 weeks. Won't eat. Please argue with him so I can make lunch." You politely decline and make a mental note to avoid anyone quoting Plato before noon. Historians still debate how much daily Roman life was affected by philosophy. While the Stoics and Epicureans left behind hefty scrolls, it's unclear whether your average fishmonger really pondered mortality while gutting a trout. Then again, this is a city where people name chickens after gods and consult dreams to find lost socks. Anything's possible. You keep walking and end up near a fountain again. One different from the mornings. This one with a little statue of a child pouring water from a jug. It's chipped and mossy. A small girl is balancing a fig on its head. When it topples, she claps like it's a personal victory. You sit beside her for a moment, resting. From across the street, the scent of roasted garlic drifts from a tavern. Someone laughs. Someone else yells about cabbage. A group of young men shout about who gets to wear the new tunic first. One of them is clearly not wearing any pants. This is the real Rome, not carved in marble or etched on coins, but scribbled in sauce-stained napkins and echoed through alleyways where children name their sandals. One quirky fact that doesn't get much attention: Roman children often played with dolls made of rags, ivory, or carved wood. Some even had movable limbs. And others, like the boy now skipping past you with something clutched in his tunic, had toys shaped like mythical creatures. You glimpse a dragon head with tiny wings carved in olive wood. "It's called Puffius," he announces proudly. You don't ask for details. As the sun begins to tip toward its downward climb, you start heading back toward a less chaotic street. There's a rhythm to Rome that's not just about time. It's about temperature, shadow, noise levels. Around midday, the city exhales. People take breaks. The chatter softens. Even the cats seem to sleep harder. You pass a man trying to balance 2 amphorae on a donkey. The donkey disagrees. A little further down, 2 women are weaving dried flowers into a crown while arguing about whether Mars or Minerva has the better temples. It's unclear who's winning, but the flower crown is lovely. At last, you reach a wide step beneath a laurel tree and sit. You stretch your legs. The breeze brushes the hem of your tunic. You close your eyes just for a moment. Somewhere nearby, a vendor shouts about his unbeatable deals on reused sandals. Someone else offers goat cheese, blessed by Jupiter himself. A dog barks. A baby laughs. And underneath it all, the sound of Rome keeps murmuring. Stone and sandal, pipe and pigeon, sponge stick and philosopher. It's loud. It's ridiculous. and somehow deeply peaceful. Your rest beneath the laurel doesn't last long, not because the city wakes you, but because of a faint, sharp smell. Vinegar? Grapes? Feet? You open one eye. Yes. Feet. Specifically, a barefoot boy splashing around with a large sack of soggy linens just a few paces away. You blink and realize you've wandered into the outskirts of a Folonica, a Roman laundry workshop. You sit up slowly, adjusting your tunic, and peer past the archway where the boy has now climbed fully into a shallow basin and begun stomping rhythmically. There's another child beside him, humming a song with no recognizable melody and tossing in something from a clay jar that smells tangy. You follow your nose into the Folonica proper. Inside, rows of basins carved into the floor host an assembly line of launders and stompers. Some use their bare feet, others wooden paddles. A few sing as they work. One older man belts out a love ballad about a woman with tunic-smoothing eyes. You have no idea what that means, but it's clearly heartfelt. This is Rome's laundry service in action. Part stomping station, part gossip hub, part mild hazard zone. A woman with a stained apron and arms strong enough to wrestle a mule notices you. She waves a wooden paddle. You here for pickup or stomp duty? You open your mouth to reply, but realize you're unsure which answer will result in less sweat. Neither, you say. Just watching. She nods, unfazed. Ah, a spectator. Don't lean too close to the fermentation pit. You lean back. The smell here is complex. Urine, used as a cleaning agent, collected from jars left out in alleyways. Sulfur, rotting fruit, and the undeniable tang of toil. It's not pleasant. It's not awful. It's just Roman. Mainstream fact. Roman fullers used human urine because it contains ammonia, which helped lift grease and stains from wool. Entire taxes were once levied on the collection of urine. Emperor Vespasian even taxed public urinals. When questioned about it, he supposedly held up a coin and said, "Money doesn't stink." Asterisk. You're not entirely convinced. Near the back, two men are scrubbing tunics over a carved stone table, occasionally dipping them into a chalky solution. She said I smelled like vinegar and regret. One mutters. The other shrugs. At least she noticed. As you watch the chaotic ballet of stomping, ringing, and flinging, you notice the walls are painted with scenes of neatly folded tunics, smiling clients, and gods with improbably white robes. You're fairly sure none of this art was based on reality. A small cat tiptoes across a drying line. A young girl chases it, barefoot and scolding. The cat ignores her completely, as cats do in every century. Historians still debate how widely Philoniki were used across Roman social classes. While the wealthy had slaves for laundry, many preferred to send their clothing out to professionals who understood the difference between soft linen folds and the stiff dignity of senator's wool. Some even suspect that fashion-conscious Romans sent their togas in for strategic bleaching just before public speeches. You imagine standing in front of the Senate smelling faintly of pickled socks and foot-stomped soap. Courage, indeed. You sit for a while, watching a boy hang linens on a rope stretched between two columns. The cloth flutters in the breeze like sails. Through the gaps, the city peaks, rooftops, pigeons, temple domes, and one man dramatically gesturing with an entire fish. The woman with the paddle approaches again. Want a job? You glance at your tunic. It could use a good stomp. But the thought of soaking it in what you now know is alley jar liquid doesn't inspire you. I'm still deciding, you say diplomatically. She grins and waves you off. Suit yourself. Just remember, the gods don't do laundry. You leave the Phalonica, your footsteps sticky against the cobbled street. A boy outside offers you a grape, but you're not sure if it's a snack or part of his soap-making kit, so you politely decline. You meander down a lane where merchants sell bundles of lavender and sprigs of rosemary, presumably for people who've just passed the Phalonica. One seller claims her rosemary cures cowardice. Another says it'll make your breath smell like a nymph's. You buy a sprig just in case both are true. As you turn the corner, the street opens into a quieter piazza. It's shaded by an old fig tree with a bench beneath it, occupied, of course, by two elderly men playing a slow game of dice. You pause. Laundry day? One of them asks, squinting at your damp sandals. You nod. Good. Rome always smells better after laundry day, he says, and then adds, for about 6 minutes. They return to their game, rolling dice carved from bone and grumbling about a third player who always cheated with his eyebrows. You don't ask. You settle on the edge of the fountain nearby, where a pigeon is delicately sipping and a fishmonger is shouting about discounts. So good Neptune himself is blushing. You catch your reflection in the rippling water, sun-kissed, slightly flushed, tunic now wrinkled in new places. You breathe in. The air here is better. Floral. Dry. You can still smell laundry, but from a distance it's nearly poetic. A quirky tidbit scholars rarely mention. Some Romans believed that laundering a tunic under the right astrological sign, particularly Mercury's day, would make its wearer more persuasive. It's unclear if the stars truly helped, but you mentally mark your next wash for a Wednesday just in case. You lean back and let your eyes close. For a moment, you hear only the wind moving through fig leaves. Rome has stilled for just a breath, between the shouts, the bartering, the stomping, the politics. You exhale. Tomorrow, your tunic might smell like vinegar again. Tomorrow, someone might throw chickpeas at your head in the latrine. But today, in this strange slice of sunshine, with rosemary in your pocket and the scent of soap fading from your clothes, you feel entirely, dreamily Roman. You rise slowly from the fountain, rosemary still tucked behind your ear like an honorary laurel crown. The tunic clings faintly to your legs, still damp from the Phalonica, and your sandals have developed a charming squelch with every other step. But the breeze is warm, and the streets are quieter now, as the midday lull settles over the city like a soft woolen shawl. Rome, even in its chaos, respects the power of the balnei, the bathhouses. You decide that's where you're heading next, not to wash necessarily, you've technically just done that, but to soak, to sit, to let the heat and the gossip and the trickling fountains soften you like a well-oiled amphora. You take the slow route toward the Thermae of Titus, one of the public bathhouses with a decent reputation and only an occasional snake sighting. As you approach, you pass through the grand entrance, columns on either side, etched with carvings of gods in dramatic bathing poses. Inside, the atmosphere changes instantly. The air is thick with steam and murmurs, a living fog of heat and conversation. A boy greets you, holds out a hand for your strigil, a curved tool used to scrape off oil and dirt from the body. You hand him yours, which you found months ago wedged under a wine crate. He eyes it suspiciously, but shrugs and leads you inside. The apoditerium, or changing room, is bustling. Men of all ages are undressing, folding tunics with varying levels of care, and hiding their valuables in the walls, literally. Small cubbies carved into the stone line the room, many watched over by slaves, or, in wealthier cases, by very grumpy relatives. You tuck your coin pouch into a niche and say a small, silent prayer to Mercury, patron of travelers, messengers, and people who don't want their sandals stolen. Wrapped in a towel-like cloth, you pass into the tepidarium, the warm room. It's just right. The floor is heated from below by hypocausts, a Roman innovation that sounds fancier than it looks, but works like magic. The air is thick but comforting, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes your eyelids feel suddenly heavier. You sink onto a bench next to a man who's humming what might be a love song or might be about cheese. Hard to say. He nods at you. Long morning? Fulanica, you answer. He winces in sympathy. You sit quietly together for a while, letting the warmth work its way through your limbs. Across the room, a group of older men are arguing over whether Alexander the Great would have liked Roman plumbing. One insists he would have redesigned it. Another claims he'd have invented better soap. The third, leaning on his elbow like a reclining philosopher, says Alexander probably smelled like goat. You move on before it escalates. The caldarium, the hot room, greets you like an oven full of citrus and old ambition. The walls sweat alongside the bathers. In the center, a large basin simmers quietly. You slip in. The heat is intense at first. You feel your pulse in your fingertips. But then it smooths into something bearable, like being wrapped in sun-warmed clay. You lean back. The ceiling disappears into mist. Somewhere behind you, a man is explaining how dreams work to a very bored teenager. If your dream has a goat in it, he says, you'll gain something. If the goat speaks, you owe Jupiter a pie. No one corrects him. Mainstream fact. Roman bathhouses were not just for bathing. They were social centers, gyms, libraries, restaurants, and places of light gossip warfare. Senators and scribes, merchants and gladiators, all soaked together, though not always in the same rooms. Social status dictated everything in Rome, even steam access. One fringe tidbit? Some Romans brought trained slaves just to whisper news to them while they relaxed. Nothing says, I'm important, like getting updated on a naval tax dispute while you exfoliate. You linger in the caldarium until your thoughts go soft. Then, reluctantly, you rise and head toward the frigidarium. Cold water. A Roman rite of passage. Or punishment, depending on your mood. You stand at the edge of the small, shimmering pool. Other bathers lounge casually inside, chatting as if their bodies weren't in icy torment. One gestures for you to join. You step in. It is cold. Colder than the Tiber in winter. Colder than your landlord's heart. Colder than that look Aurelia gave you when you forgot the figs. But after the heat of the caldarium, it feels like the shock of being reborn. You take a breath and submerge up to your neck. Your skin sings. You lean against the edge, eyes half-lidded, as someone nearby reads a passage from Virgil aloud in a slow, rhythmic voice. Not for show. He's just practicing. Still, it makes for an elegant soundtrack as the water laps gently around your shoulders. Historians still debate how much time Romans spent in the baths daily. Some claim an hour, others several. But most agree that it wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about community. You weren't just scrubbing off dirt. You were soaking up culture, eavesdropping on civic plans, maybe catching a glimpse of someone who owed you a favor. Eventually, your fingers begin to wrinkle. You step out, pat yourself dry with a woven cloth handed to you by a boy who then disappears like a polite shadow, and head toward the unctorium, the oil room. Here, attendants rub bathers with perfumed oil before scraping it gently away with a strigil. You lie down on a marble slab as a man begins the work. He's humming. It's calming. You nearly fall asleep. "Where are you from?" he asks. "Here," you mumble. He nods. Everyone is, eventually. You don't know what that means, but it sounds profound enough to accept. He finishes, hands you a small cloth, and nods. You dress slowly, the air around you now crisp, your skin soft and faintly citrus-scented. You leave the bathhouse through a side door that opens onto a shaded street. The sun is lower now, the shadows longer, the voices quieter. You walk slower, lighter. The city smells better now. Bread, lavender, hot stone. You glance upward. The rooftops are golden. A cat blinks at you from a ledge. A boy runs past, chasing a hoop. Somewhere, someone sneezes and curses in Greek. And as you walk, freshly bathed and fully Roman, the sound of sandals on stone follows you like a lullaby. The sun continues its slow descent, casting warm, honeyed light across the rooftops and market awnings. You walk in a sleepy, satisfied daze, clean, well-oiled, and possibly more hydrated than you've been in a week. The bathhouse fog hasn't quite left your head yet. Every breeze feels like a lullaby in fabric form. You round a corner into one of the smaller, vicus streets, and the city tightens around you, narrower, busier, more personal. Here, the buildings lean slightly over the street, like they're gossiping. You can hear conversations drifting from open windows, interrupted now and then by a clatter of pottery or a goat's disapproving bleat. You follow the scent of roasting onions and lentils, winding past the bronze worker's stall, where a young apprentice is trying to mold a helmet and mostly succeeding at burning his fingers. It's a creative process, he insists, shaking his hand in midair. A woman nearby is selling small herbal bundles tied with string. Protection from envy, she offers, then adds with a wink, or from bad cooks. You politely decline, but she tucks a sprig of bay leaf into your belt anyway. "Just in case," she says. You pass a chalkboard nailed to a pillar announcing tonight's pantomime at the neighborhood theatrum. It promises unexpected farm animals, seductive flute solos, and one actor in 4 wigs. You make a mental note. Could be an excellent way to digest dinner. But first, you're hungry. Just beyond the market stalls lies a small popina, a Roman tavern that's more like a street food stand with dreams of grandeur. You duck inside. The ceiling is low, the oil lamps dim, and the air hums with the clinking of bowls and the low burble of mildly drunken conversation. Behind the counter, a bald man with a spoon tucked into his hair nods. "Sit. You look like a person who needs lentils." You do, in fact, need lentils. He ladles you a warm bowl from a massive clay pot, throws in a chunk of bread that doubles as a spoon, and offers you a drink he claims is only mildly fermented. You take both with gratitude and sit at a shared bench near the back. Around you, voices blend into a pleasant, edible murmur. To your left, 2 gladiators in training argue about calf stretches. To your right, a woman is patiently explaining the difference between a lark and a sparrow to someone who definitely isn't listening. Your food is perfect, simple, hot, and spiced with something that tastes like garlic, cumin, and a small blessing. Mainstream fact: most Romans didn't cook their own meals. Kitchens were rare in Insulae, especially on upper floors. Fires were risky, space was limited, and honestly, when lentils like this existed just a coin away, Why bother? Taverns and food stalls weren't luxuries. They were everyday essentials. You finish your meal slowly, tearing bits of bread with your teeth and sipping from your cup. The liquid is vaguely sweet and somewhat alarming, but you decide it's best not to ask. Your attention drifts to a mural painted above the serving counter, crudely done but charming. It depicts a bearded man riding a dolphin while holding a wine jug. No explanation, no caption, just joy. One fringe tidbit: dolphin riding does show up in some Roman mosaics and frescoes, especially in bathhouses and seaside villas. Whether they thought it was poetic, religious, or just very funny remains a mystery. Historians still debate if it represented actual sea stories, symbolic journeys to the afterlife, or just good marketing for expensive villas in Baiae. A breeze slips through the open doorway, and with it, the sounds of evening Rome waking up again. The lull has passed. People are moving. The city is stretching its arms, ready for the next act. You thank the cook, who waves you off with a bowl in each hand, and step back into the street. The sky is beginning to bruise, dusky blue, streaked with the orange of torches being lit. The street lamps, small oil-filled niches in walls, flicker into life, casting wobbly shadows on the cobblestones. Someone lights incense near a statue of Mercury, and the air grows sweet. You walk toward the Taberna Libraria, the bookshop. It's more of a scroll den, really. Narrow, cool, lined with wooden shelves bowed under the weight of inked papyrus and wax tablets. The scent of musty parchment and melted beeswax is oddly soothing. Inside, an elderly man is muttering to himself while stacking scrolls by category. History, boring history, slightly less boring history, suspiciously poetic history. You browse slowly. Titles are handwritten in faded ink, sometimes corrected mid-scroll by more confident scribes. One scroll claims to be "The True History of a Fish Who Debated a Senator." You raise an eyebrow. Tempting. You ask the bookseller if he has anything new. He squints. New like newly written, or new like I only just found it under a chair? Surprise me, you say. He hands you a scroll bound in red ribbon. It's a comedy, probably, or a treatise about ducks. Hard to tell. You tuck it into your pouch. Historians continue to puzzle over the real literacy levels of everyday Romans. While elite citizens read and wrote often, graffiti and wax tablets suggest that many non-elite folks were at least functionally literate, especially in cities. Whether that meant signing contracts, reading tavern menus, or decoding insults carved into a neighbor's wall is still up for debate. You leave the bookshop and find yourself back near the theater square. People are gathering now, some in their best tunics, others still carrying baskets. The smell of roasted nuts and citrus hangs in the air. Somewhere, a flute begins to play. It's slightly off-key, which only adds to the charm. You consider staying for the show, but instead, you walk just a little farther, past the edge of the torchlit crowd, toward a side street where the sounds grow softer again. There's a small temple here, unassuming, nestled between two bakeries. It's dedicated to Lares, the household gods. You stop, press your palm to the cool stone of the outer wall, and whisper a quiet thanks for the food, the bath, the scroll, and the fact that no one threw chickpeas at your head today. The city settles a little deeper into itself as dusk becomes night. You start heading home. Your tunic is wrinkled, your scroll pouch is heavier, your limbs are tired in a good way. You pass a boy drawing chalk circles on the pavement and muttering spells. A man nearby argues with a goat. From a window above, someone sings a lullaby to a baby while someone else loudly critiques it. And just as you reach the corner that turns toward your insula, a voice calls out, "You forgot your rosemary." You turn. It's the herb seller from earlier waving a bundle at you. You smile. "Keep it for the next coward." She laughs. "Then I'll save a bundle for the whole Senate." Rome, messy, magnificent, mildly fermented, wraps around you like a threadbare blanket. Imperfect, but home. You turn the final corner toward your insula, your multi-story Roman apartment building, just as a neighbor tips out a bowl of dishwater from the second floor. It splashes dangerously close to your sandals. She shrugs and waves like she's tossing rice at a wedding. You wave back. This is normal. The alley narrows. The hum of the city quiets slightly here. Children chase a hoop down the slope, their laughter echoing off brick and plaster walls. A cat lounges on a broken column base, half asleep, its tail twitching in rhythm with the fading sounds of street performers still battling flutes. Your building creaks gently in the evening breeze, like it's trying to remember something. Most insula do this, built fast, built high, and built with the architectural equivalent of crossed fingers. You glance upward. Laundry flutters from balconies. A single sandal dangles from a string. Someone above is shouting about stew ratios. It's good to be home. You step through the doorway and into the narrow stairwell, immediately hit with a familiar bouquet, must, onions, old firewood, and just a whisper of someone's cologne from 2 floors up. You climb the stairs slowly, feeling the day's steps accumulate in your knees. The walls are rough, the torch sconces flickering. There's a neighbor arguing with his dog on the first floor. You pass without comment. Your unit is near the top, not because you're elite, but because you're not. Lower floors cost more. Rich people hate stairs, and maybe falling bricks. You reach your wooden door, which sticks slightly unless you whisper threats to it. It finally creaks open, revealing your one-room haven. A cot tucked into the corner, a low table with uneven legs, a clay oil lamp, a cracked cup, and a small altar shelf with 2 worn figurines, one Lares, one Minerva, both permanently tilted as if in disagreement. You close the door behind you and exhale. It's not grand, but it's yours. You kick off your sandals. One gives up with a squelch. You place the scroll from the bookshop on the table. From your pocket, you retrieve the rosemary sprig, now slightly wilted but still fragrant. You tuck it above the door, protection from bad luck or at least bad drafts. You light the oil lamp. The flame flutters to life, casting long shadows that make your clay cup look philosophical. Mainstream fact: most Roman apartments were one-room spaces, especially for the working class. Kitchens were rare. So were toilets. Fires were constant concerns, and overcrowding meant you often knew your neighbor's business better than your own. Yet somehow, it all worked. Rome thrived on proximity, noise, and quick repairs. You sit on your cot, which creaks like a Roman senator after a long dinner, and unroll the scroll the bookseller gave you. The ink is faded in places, smudged in others. It begins mid-sentence, of course. And if the duck refuses, then the treaty must be renegotiated under Jupiter's 3rd moon. You squint. South comedy, then. You read a few more lines. Something about socks that smell of ambition. Something about a tax on songbirds. Something about a magistrate who was secretly 3 raccoons in a toga. You laugh quietly, Because why not? It's been a long day. You're clean. You're fed. You've survived the laundry pits. You deserve a joke about raccoon senators. Outside, the sounds have softened into sleep mode Rome. Occasional footsteps on the stairwell, a muffled lullaby in Oscan, or maybe very tired Latin, the snap of someone folding a table, the rustle of a cat plotting something on a roof tile, a gentle knock at your door. You blink. You open it to find your neighbor from one floor below, Marcus, the one who smells constantly of olives and political doubt. He holds a small clay bowl. "I made stew," he says, not entirely proudly. "There was extra." You accept the bowl. It smells like lentils, onions, and something that might be either mushroom or mystery. "Thanks," you say. "I'll expect a full review by tomorrow," he adds, then vanishes into the stairwell, muttering about proportions. Historians still debate the extent to which food was shared among neighbors in Roman insulae. Some argue that the tight living quarters fostered community. Others say resentment simmered over noise, smells, and theft of laundry. The truth is, probably both. In your case, stew diplomacy seems alive and well. You place the bowl on the table and sit back on the cot again. The oil lamp flickers lower now. Shadows stretch longer. You glance up at your figurines, Minerva and Lares, and raise your cup in salute. "Good work today," you tell them. They don't respond, but they seem mildly approving in the lamplight. You lie back, staring at the cracked ceiling. You trace the lines with your eyes. The scroll rests by your feet. The stew is cooling. Somewhere nearby, someone starts playing a flute. It's slow, slightly off-key. Possibly the same performer from the forum this morning, now relocated to a rooftop. A quirky fact, some Romans believed that flute music could help digestion and even soothe nightmares. They also believed that sneezes were mini messages from the gods, so the bar was somewhere near street level. Still, the melody does calm you. You close your eyes. Rome hums gently beneath you. Stone and sandals, gossip and goat, scrolls and stew. A city always just slightly too large, too noisy, too smoky, and yet exactly the right size to hold a day like this one. You wake slowly, not because you're startled, but because Rome has a way of nudging you from sleep the same way it drifts you into it. A creaking cart 2 floors down. A rooster with theatrical timing. The smell of someone reheating last night's stew and pretending it's breakfast. You blink at your ceiling, still cracked, still holding. The figurines above your little altar shelf are now bathed in golden morning light. Minerva's shadow stretches long across the wall, almost like she's reaching for the scroll you fell asleep reading. You sit up, stretch, and are immediately reminded of yesterday's Philonica footbath. Your legs feel like they've wrestled a small ox. Twice. You take a sip of leftover water and head toward the stairwell, carrying your clay cup and Marcus's now empty stew bowl. Outside your door, someone has scribbled a chalk message on the wall. Borrowed your stool. Left you a fig. The fig is gone. Naturally, you descend, passing neighbors who nod with the slow, silent dignity of people who are still deciding whether they've actually woken up yet. The stairwell smells like bread and ambition. You like it. Outside, the sun is already high enough to bake the rooftops. Rome is fully awake. You pass through the lower alley and emerge into a nearby square where vendors are setting up for the Nundinae, Rome's market day. 8-day cycles, each one bringing a fresh wave of stalls, noise, and enough shouting to qualify as mild theater. Today, you're on a mission. You need a new stylus. Yours snapped 3 days ago mid-list, somewhere between buy lentils and ask Aurelia if that rumor about her goat is true. You never got to either. The market buzzes with morning energy. To your left, a fishmonger balancing a bucket on his head while lecturing a sea bass. To your right, a woman selling figs and singing something that sounds suspiciously like a love song about barley. You squeeze through a row of pottery stalls, careful not to knock over anything labeled genuine imported Etruscan, probably, and find the scribe's corner. It's modest. Just a few tables, a couple of seated sellers, and a sign offering ink, wax, and all your regrettable poem needs. You approach a man polishing a stack of wax tablets with a cloth that looks suspiciously like a repurposed toga sleeve. Stylus? You ask. Pointed or poetic? He replies. Both, you say. He nods and hands you one carved from bone, smoothed at the edges, with just enough curve to look dramatic when you make a shopping list. You test it against a nearby wax slab and nod. Satisfying. As you count out your coins, a small boy sprints past yelling, "They're back! They're back!" Someone leans over from another stall. "What's back?" "Postal mules." And just like that, the square leans eastward. You follow the sudden ripple of excitement through the crowd and find a group gathering near the Cursus Publicus. Stop. Rome's postal station. A small platform near the edge of the road is stacked with leather satchels, dust-covered scrolls, and one very unimpressed mule chewing something that's definitely not approved postal fodder. Mainstream fact. The Roman postal system, Cursus Publicus, was surprisingly efficient. Using a relay system of riders, mules, and rest stations, messages and goods could travel across vast distances with Roman speed and certainty. That said, it was technically only for official use. Government matters, military orders, imperial gossip. Not everyone followed that rule. You inch closer. One clerk is calling out names, distributing sealed scrolls. Another is trying to separate two mules tangled in their harnesses. A woman nearby mutters, "I hope my cousin finally got my recipe for pickled radishes." A man beside her sighs, "I sent my will last month. Should have just carved it into my sandals." A younger boy bounces in place, hoping for a letter from his brother in Gaul. A baker waits for flour orders. A local teacher waits for ink from Alexandria. One elderly woman waits for a birthday message that's 4 months late. She blames Neptune. You overhear a courier mumbling about a scroll with directions written in bad Latin and worse handwriting. "I ended up at a vineyard, a temple, and a wrestling match before I figured it out." He doesn't sound upset. He sounds impressed. A fringe tidbit? Some Romans trained pigeons to carry tiny scrolls, especially in private circles. While not officially part of the Cursus Publicus, they were affectionately known as sky messengers. Historians still argue whether that was a common practice or mostly poetic embellishment. Either way, the pigeons never asked for a tip. Eventually, the excitement dies down, scrolls are collected, and the mules receive honorary pats before being led off stage. The clerk wipes his brow and says, "If I see another message about someone's lost sandal, I'm charging extra." You linger for a moment, imagining your own scroll sailing across Italy. Maybe to Ostia, maybe to Gaul, maybe just to the guy 3 blocks away who keeps losing your bills. Then you head back through the market, stylus tucked neatly into your belt. On the way, you pass a man advertising his dream interpretation services. His sign reads, "Snake in dream equals money. Chicken in dream equals more chicken." You consider asking about raccoon senators but decide against it. As you near the edge of the square, you spot something odd. a very serious-looking man attempting to balance a scroll, a lute, and a small bowl of soup while walking in a perfectly straight line. You pause. He takes 3 steps, wobbles, and spills a little broth. A friend cheers anyway. That's the best yet. The gods smile on your multitasking. You smile too. Rome always finds new ways to entertain you. You turn toward a quieter street, away from the crowd, scroll dust still thick in the air, morning still unfolding. The stylus feels good in your hand. You think of the lists you might write, or the poem, or just a reminder not to forget the next fig someone leaves you. Rome hums behind you like a distant song. The street you wander into is one of those liminal Roman places, too narrow for a proper chariot, too winding for clear directions, too quiet to feel like it belongs in the city at all. But Rome is built of these in-between spaces, alleys where statues outnumber people, corners where stories cling to the stones like ivy, and stretches of silence between the shouting. You pass under a crumbling archway where someone has carved, Felix est qui nihil expectat. Happy is the one who expects nothing. Below it, a slightly more modern scrawl adds, especially from landlords. You smile. The air here is cooler, shaded by stone and fig trees planted in oversized jars. A fountain gurgles from a lion's head, its mouth worn smooth by time and pigeons. You dip your hands in the cool water, splash your face and lean against the edge for a moment of stillness. And then you hear it. Bells. Not the chime of temple offerings or the jangling of goat harnesses. These are high, clear, melodic, a rhythm of soft clinks that grows louder with every step of the man approaching. He appears around the bend like a character from a half-remembered dream, tall, thin, wrapped in a loose blue-gray robe with dozens of tiny brass bells stitched into the hem. They shimmer as he walks, announcing him with a soft metallic murmur. On his shoulder, balanced carefully, is a long rod from which hang 2 scroll cases, and strapped to his back is a large, rectangular box with an opening at the top. A librarian. Specifically, a circulating librarian, one of the lesser-known yet entirely real characters of the Roman streetscape. Mainstream fact, public libraries did exist in ancient Rome. Some were grand institutions, attached to baths or temples, filled with scrolls and marble busts. But there were also roving librarians who carried curated selections of scrolls to different neighborhoods, sometimes for small reading clubs, sometimes to rent to bored elites or curious merchants. Rome had readers, and readers needed books, even in back alleys. He stops in front of you, bells settling into silence. Interested in a midday scroll? He asks, voice as soft as parchment. You nod. What's your selection? He kneels, carefully lowers the scroll cases, and opens one with a reverent sigh. Inside, neat rows of titles inked onto small wooden labels, each one tied to a tightly rolled scroll, some sealed with wax, others worn from many readings. Comedies, epics, local histories, herbal remedies, dreams of poets, questionable cookbooks, or, he says, pulling out a small scroll tied with red string, love letters from people who never sign their names. You raise an eyebrow. That one's popular, he says, mostly read by people who claim they're just curious. You choose something neutral. A day in the Forum. Observations of a retired tribune. It seems promising. He smiles, rings a small bell, not out of necessity, but ceremony, and notes your selection in a wax tablet tucked into his sash. You hand him a small coin. He hands you a date. A snack for your reading. he explains, and a symbol of wisdom. Fringe tidbit? Some Roman street librarians gave small fruit or herbs along with their scrolls. Part gift, part marketing. One poet wrote about receiving a scroll with a walnut inside. He wasn't sure if it was a metaphor or just lunch. You take the scroll and the date, thank the librarian, and watch him move on, bells chiming faintly again, drawing a curious child and a very judgmental cat in his wake. You find a low wall near the edge of a vegetable garden, abandoned for the hour, and sit. The scroll smells faintly of lavender. The handwriting is careful but full of personality, looping letters and the occasional doodle in the margins. The retired Tribune writes about people watching in the forum, how some senators walk with the weight of statues on their shoulders, how the bird sellers argue more poetically than the poets, how lovers use shadows to whisper things they couldn't say in light. He writes about a baker who times his bread flips with sunbeams on the stones, about a beggar who recites Virgil, correcting passing scholars, about the moment a child lost a marble and 3 grown men spent 20 minutes helping him look, despite pretending otherwise. Historians still debate how widely scroll culture penetrated everyday Roman life. Many argue it was mostly for elites, those who had time to read and enough education to make sense of Cicero's run-on sentences. But scraps of poetry have been found scrawled on walls in taverns and bathhouses. Entire plays were etched onto pots. And people like this librarian, bells and all, suggest there was more curiosity in the streets than textbooks admit. You finish the scroll. You eat the date. You smile. You return the scroll to the box near the fountain where the librarian leaves his late drops. A small sign says, "Whisper a thanks before returning. Scrolls remember." You do. You walk again. The street widens slowly into a square. Not a grand one, just a working corner where workshops meet food stalls, and someone has drawn a hopscotch grid with numbers written in Latin and bad spelling. A boy hops past you singing, "Uno, duo, tre." Oops, and falls dramatically. A girl declares herself the new Caesar and crowns herself with a lettuce leaf. Rome, as always, balances gravitas with chaos. You hear the voice before you see the man, deep, resonant, carrying easily even over the clatter of a dropped amphora. He's reciting lines from Plautus, a Roman playwright famous for his fast-talking slaves and mistaken identities. The performance is half for the crowd and half for himself. You pause. He notices, nods, and includes you in the next verse. The cook is a philosopher. He burns things, yes, but he burns with purpose. The crowd chuckles. Someone throws him a fig. He catches it mid-line without breaking rhythm. You linger just a moment longer before moving on, the memory of scrolls, bells, and poets in your pocket now. The wind picks up gently. The city exhales. You feel the rhythm of Rome under your feet again, the tap of sandals on stone, the whisper of parchment, the bells in the distance fading. Another alley beckons. Another story waiting. The alley you turn into this time has no name, no market, no scroll-holding librarian. It smells faintly of damp limestone and oregano, with an undertone of recent argument. A woman stands in a doorway with arms folded, glaring upward. Above her, a man leans from a balcony, holding what looks like a badly carved wooden duck. "You call this a gift?" she shouts. "It's symbolic," he shouts back. You decide not to ask. You walk on. The neighborhood shifts again, less crowded, older, somehow softer. Vines creep up cracked walls. A statue of a forgotten minor god, possibly one responsible for tree bark, leans gently forward as if offering advice no one ever asked for. Here, the stones beneath your feet are worn smoother. You've reached one of the older districts, parts of Rome that were ancient, even by Roman standards. Shrines tucked into wall crevices, buildings layered like lasagna, and somewhere ahead, the scent of garum. Ah, yes. The legendary fermented fish sauce of Rome. You follow your nose. A small shop with a bright red awning sits crookedly between a shrine to Fortuna and what may once have been a barber's stall. The sign above the door reads, "Garum and Sons, established before we could count." Inside, shelves are lined with clay jugs sealed with wax. Each one is labeled with hopeful titles like Saffron Breeze, Delicate Anchovy, and Bold Yet Mysterious. A young man, possibly one of the unsungs, greets you with the cheerful weariness of someone who smells like fish sauce all day and has made peace with that fate. "Welcome," he says. "Free sample?" You hesitate. He uncorks a small jug and dips a piece of bread into it. Mainstream fact: garum was used in nearly everything, from stews to desserts. Made by fermenting fish, typically mackerel, with salt and letting it sit in the sun for months, it produced a pungent, salty umami flavor that Romans adored. Modern historians compare it to a mix between soy sauce and Worcestershire sauce, if they were also a religious experience. You try the bread. It's an experience. Salty, rich, somehow sweet. You're not sure whether you've eaten a flavor or entered into a contract with Neptune, but you nod politely. The garum seller beams. "You taste the sardine sole?" You nod again, more firmly this time. He shows you a shelf near the back. "This one," he whispers, "was aged during a lunar eclipse. They say it grants perspective." You don't ask what that means. You buy the smallest jar, and he wraps it in cloth like a sacred relic. As you exit the shop, you notice a faded inscription scratched into the stone near the door. "Garum brings wisdom, or at least digestion." A fringe tidbit? Some elite Romans had garum jars labeled with vintage years, like fine wine. In fact, one poet claimed he could taste the year of the salt harvest just from a sniff. Historians still debate whether he was being serious or simply hungry. You tuck the jar into your satchel and continue on, the tangy scent following you like a perfume designed by Poseidon. The street opens into a small plaza where people gather for midday errands. A woman sells woven sandals. A man mends a broken lute with twine and curses. A group of school children sit cross-legged around a young tutor who's reading from a wax tablet and trying to pronounce Greek without sounding afraid. You pause beside the fountain at the plaza's center. It's shaped like a hippocampus, half horse, half fish, and one of its marble eyes is missing, which somehow makes it look more trustworthy. You dip your hand in again. Romans reuse fountains like we reuse favorite mugs. Familiar, a little chipped, but always comforting. Nearby, an elderly man is selling carved bone charms laid out on a cloth. Each one represents something: strength, fertility, good sleep, faster mules. You pick up one shaped like a miniature broom. "Cleans away bad dreams," he says. "Also dust if you're patient." You trade him a coin, and he tucks it into a pouch, muttering a blessing in Oscan. You thank him, hang the broom charm on your satchel, and start down another lane. This part of Rome is quieter still, bordering on rural. You pass an old well, a cluster of beehives, and a field where someone is trying to teach chickens not to attack each other. It's not going well. You reach a low stone wall with vines creeping over the top, and beyond it, fields, actual fields. Rows of vegetables stretch out under the warm sky. Cabbages, onions, squashes, and the occasional rebellious artichoke. You lean on the wall and breathe in the mix of earth, sun, and leafy ambition. Historians often overlook this version of Rome: the urban farms, the rooftop gardens, the backyard plots tucked behind taverns. But they were real. The city was fed from within as much as without. Grain and oil came from afar, but lettuce came from 3 blocks over. And every Roman, deep down, had an opinion about cucumbers. Someone nearby clears their throat. You glance over to find an older woman carrying a basket full of herbs. She eyes your satchel. "Garum?" she asks. You nod. She nods back. "Smart." You gesture to her basket. "Mint?" "Smart," she echoes. It's a rare thing in Rome to share a compliment that's just one word and still feel like you've had a full conversation. She walks on. You linger. You pluck a wild fig from a tree leaning over the wall. The fruit is soft, sun-warmed, and exactly ripe. You eat it slowly, seeds crunching gently, juice trailing down your fingers. It tastes like memory. Rome hums in the distance, fainter now, like the city itself is catching its breath. You wipe your hands, adjust your satchel, and begin the slow walk back toward sound and stone. Your steps feel lighter. You carry garum, a carved broom, a belly full of fig, and a mind full of odd, wonderful scrolls. The day is only halfway through, and already you've lived enough stories for 2. You wander back through Rome, fig juice still sticky on your fingertips, and the carved broom charm swinging gently from your satchel with each step. The sun has shifted again, angling low enough to turn the rooftops golden. The city stretches, yawning, creaking, blinking in the mid-afternoon haze. As you re-enter the denser parts of town, the streets grow busier. A pair of jugglers practice beside a column, one muttering rhythm counts while the other whispers threats at a disobedient melon. A donkey backs slowly into a pottery stand and pretends not to notice. Someone sneezes 3 times, and a passerby shouts, "Auspicious!" You find yourself approaching one of Rome's many tabernae medicae, a medical shop and treatment center. From the outside, it looks like someone tried to open a pharmacy, a barber shop, and a religious shrine, then gave up and called it a day. The window display is impressive. Jars of dried herbs, clay pots labeled teeth oil and spleen tonic, a dried lizard nailed to a board, decorative, you hope, and a wax model of a human foot that appears to double as a candle holder. You step inside. It's cool and shadowed, with rows of shelves holding vials, bandages, and things with too many vowels. The scent is overpowering. Mint, vinegar, resin, and the distinct smell of maybe this isn't sanitary. A man in a stained tunic looks up from a mortar and pestle. Looking for something? Sleep troubles? Digestive complaints? Mysterious elbow squeak? You shake your head. Just browsing. Mainstream fact: Roman medicine was an odd mix of real science, Greek philosophy, religious rituals, and utter guesswork. Some physicians were brilliant, studying anatomy from animal dissections, even using surgical tools still recognizable today. Others prescribed boiled mouse wine for stomach aches. The man holds up a jar. This one's good for dreams. Also repels cats. You take a polite step back. On one shelf, a tablet reads, "For headaches, willow bark, rest, and avoid loud senators." Sensible. Below it, a more ambitious recipe suggests a concoction of cumin, fish bones, and goat's tears. Less sensible. You examine a small clay pot labeled Aqua Celestis. The label reads, "For clarity, digestion, and possibly eternal wisdom." Possibly. The healer watches you. You want something simple or something mysterious? You consider mysterious, but not adventurous. He nods, pulls down a sachet filled with dried herbs and what might be crushed olives. Boil it. Breathe the steam. Dream about birds or accountants. You hand him a few coins and accept the sachet. It smells like thyme, ink, and optimism. As you leave, you pass a man on a stool with his foot in a bucket. "I told her I could run 10 miles. I didn't tell her I meant across 4 days." The apothecary nods, as if that's a medical diagnosis. Outside again, the sky has begun to deepen. Hints of lavender pressing in from the east. Rome in twilight is a city caught between scenes. Shops half closing, lamps half lit. Voices quieter now, like everyone's saving their strength for the evening. You drift past a temple devoted to Apollo, columns pale in the fading light, votive candles flickering at the base of the steps. A priest in a gold-trimmed robe adjusts a garland and mutters a short chant. You drop a small coin into the offering bowl, not for health or fortune, but for steadiness. Rome often requires it. A nearby group of children toss small stones in a circle, chanting a game you almost recognize. Something about ducks, senators, and cheese. You pause, try to remember the rules, but the kids are laughing too hard to explain. Fringe tidbit? Ancient Roman children had dozens of street games, some with bones, some with coins, others with hoops or spinning tops. Many used rhymed chants, bits of myth, or odd counting systems. Historians still debate the full rules. Some were passed down orally, others scrawled on walls, and a few just guessed from scribbled clay tablets. A breeze stirs your tunic. You realize your stomach has started making quiet suggestions. Dinner. You pass a tavern with a flickering torch outside, but it's crowded, voices echoing off the walls. Laughter, lute music, and someone singing off-key about a baker and his problematic goose. You smile, but keep walking. Instead, you find a small street vendor frying chickpea cakes over a shallow pan. She flips them with a speed that suggests deep personal history with impatient customers. 3 for 1, she says. 4 if you promise not to ask what's in the 4th. You accept. They're hot, crisp, and deeply satisfying. One burns your tongue slightly. The 4th tastes mysterious. You decide to believe it contained rosemary and not a prank. You sit on a nearby step, nibbling slowly, watching as a small group of neighbors string lanterns between windows with a rope that's definitely too short and definitely going to sag. They cheer when it holds anyway. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of dinner and dusk settle into your limbs. Around you, the city shifts softly, shadows lengthening, firelight flickering, footsteps turning slower. Rome is winding down. Historians often focus on the grandeur, the emperors, the battles, the laws etched into marble. But this part, the herbal steam sachets, the lizard jars, the bean cakes and chant games, this was Rome too. The kind lived day to day, the kind remembered by scent and softness. You finish the last bite. The mysterious one wasn't half bad. A bell rings somewhere in the distance, soft and low, probably a call to evening prayer or a reminder to feed someone's pigs. You take a breath and rise. The lamplighters are at work now, using long poles tipped with fire to wake the city's wicks. One nods to you. You nod back. The street glows. You turn, stepping carefully around a cat who clearly owns the block, and head homeward once again. You feel the scroll in your pouch, the garum jar, the sachet, the stylus tucked neatly into your belt. Rome has filled your day, your hands, your head, and somehow, you know, there's more yet to come. By the time you make your way back toward your neighborhood, the air has thickened into the golden blue hush that only arrives when Rome exhales into evening. The city feels like it's holding a candle in cupped hands, quiet, glowing, and full of murmurs. The steps of passers-by are softer now. Horses clip slower. The torchlight leans more warmly against walls painted with age. You walk as if inside an oil painting. Soft edges, long shadows, everything a little slower, a little older. You approach a familiar square, smaller than the great forums but beloved in its own uneven way. An old sycamore tree leans dramatically over a bench like it's been eavesdropping for decades. Beneath it, an elderly man throws grain to pigeons while muttering gossip in Latin that sounds suspiciously modern. He nods as you pass. "Watch out for the white one," he says, jerking his thumb at a pigeon near your foot. "She's listening." You nod back solemnly. At the far edge of the square sits a modest, domed building, marked only by a sign carved in marble. Balneum Saturni, open at sundown. Saturn's bath. Ah, perfect timing. Mainstream fact, public baths, thermae, were more than hygiene centers in Roman life. They were hubs of social exchange, relaxation, quiet plotting, and loud arguments about figs. Men and women bathed separately most of the time, and even the most humble citizen could access heated water, thanks to Rome's aqueduct systems and hypocaust floors. Ingenious engineering that made hot baths possible long before the invention of steam radiators. You slip off your sandals and pass through the arched entrance. The interior is lit by rows of oil lamps, their flames flickering against polished tiles and soft steam. The air is thick with the scent of eucalyptus, pine resin, and wet limestone. You follow the rhythm of the ritual, disrobing in a small apoditerium, changing room, handing your belongings to a yawning attendant who may or may not remember your face from last time, and wrapping yourself in a lightweight linen cloth provided with zero ceremony. Then barefoot, you step into the tepidarium. The warm room welcomes you like a sigh. Smooth marble benches line the walls. The temperature is just enough to loosen your shoulders. You sit, close your eyes, and listen. Drips of water, soft footfalls, occasional bursts of conversation, muffled and far away. The language of a city winding itself down. Fringe tidbit? Some Romans carried special bath tools, like curved scrapers, strigils to remove oil and dirt, and customized flasks of scented body oil called unguentum. One wealthy man was said to have an entire wardrobe of post-bath perfumes. Another paid a servant just to hold his towel. You, meanwhile, settle for a standard oil blend labeled Forest Breeze. You move next into the caldarium, the hot room. Steam fogs the air so completely that other bathers become just shapes in the mist. The warmth wraps around your bones like a tunic of fire and comfort. You sit on the stone ledge, press your back against the wall, and melt. You could stay here forever. But eventually you rise, slick with sweat and serenity, and step into the frigidarium, the cold plunge. The water bites. Your brain protests. Your skin yelps. But then, clarity. Your senses reset like flipping a coin. You float briefly, staring at the domed ceiling above you, its mosaics shimmering in the lamplight. A dolphin chases a sea nymph around the curve of the dome. Their expressions are playful, bored, and eternal. Historians still debate the exact role of Roman baths in social mobility. While access was widespread, there were subtle codes: who sat where, who used which oil, who got towel privileges. Yet for a few hours a day, everyone, from scribes to senators, soaked in the same heat, exhaled the same steam. You climb out, dry off with a cloth that's seen better centuries, and return to the apoditerium. Your things are waiting, stacked precisely, with your little carved broom charm resting on top. "Your broom fought off 2 lizards," says the attendant. He might be joking. He might not. You thank him. Outside again, the air feels silkier. Rome has turned from golden to indigo. The streets glitter with oil lamps, torches, and the occasional overly ambitious lantern. Conversations are softer now, filled with food smells and lullabies. You walk slowly, carrying bath warmth in your limbs. Your satchel rests light at your side, the garum jar cool against your hip. Somewhere nearby, someone strums a lyre and hums a song with no name. You take the long way home, past the laundries now closed and folded into shadows, past a bakery shutting its shutters, the last loaves cooling on racks, past a wall where someone has scrawled in charcoal, "Every day is the Ides until proven otherwise." Asterisk. You chuckle. At last, your insula comes into view. Dim windows, sleepy voices, laundry still swaying from earlier, now dancing only with the wind. You climb the stairs slowly, body clean, mind quiet. At your door, you whisper to the wood, a trick you learned from a neighbor. "Please behave." It opens smoothly. Inside, your room is still. The oil lamp flickers. The scroll rests where you left it. The altar shelf leans slightly to the left. Home. You light the steam sachet with a few drops of water over the coals. It hisses and releases a scent that's part thyme, part ink, part distant meadow. You lie back on your cot, arms folded behind your head. Outside your window, a pair of cats argue. A neighbor snores. Somewhere far off, a mule brays its discontent into the night. You smile. Rome sleeps differently now. Softer, slower. You let your breath match its rhythm. And the last thing you hear before drifting off is the sound of one soft bell in the distance. A librarian, perhaps, heading home. The morning doesn't so much arrive as it sneaks in. A soft blush of pink behind the rooftops. The chirp of one overconfident bird. The faint rustle of someone folding laundry before sunrise, because time in Rome rarely waits for permission. You open your eyes slowly, comforted by the scent of the last night's herbal steam still lingering faintly in the room. A good sleep, rare, full, and dreamless. Or maybe the dream was just too polite to wake you. Your limbs are heavy in the best way. No urgency, no to-do list, yet invading your thoughts. Just that gentle Roman rhythm. Rise when the light does, eat when the market sings, and speak only when your voice agrees. You sit up and pad quietly toward the window. Outside, the alley below is still stretching its arms. A girl with a basket of bread tiptoes past a sleeping cat. A man gently wakes his mule with a verse from Virgil, possibly for the mule's benefit, possibly his own. Your breath fogs the glass slightly. You draw a lazy spiral with your finger before turning away. You dress simply today. No events, no errands, no sandals that demand attention. Just your softest tunic, a belt you don't have to adjust, and the little carved broom charm now dangling from the window ledge like a sleepy guardian. You gather your things, stylus, satchel, scroll, garum, just in case, and the sachet of dried herbs now thoroughly spent. You whisper thanks to it anyway. Down the stairs you nod to the neighbor, who always nods back. He never speaks. You suspect it's a silent competition. The street greets you with fresh bread smells and the creak of a grocer's cart. The sky has turned from blush to gold, and the cobblestones are still cool beneath your feet. Today, you've decided, is for the river. Not for errands, not for philosophy, not even for snacks. Though, let's be honest, snacks will happen. Today is for standing beside the Tiber and remembering why you live in this city at all. Mainstream fact, the Tiber River, Tiberias, to the Romans, was more than water. It was a lifeline, a trade route, a boundary, a backdrop for legends. Romulus and Remus were said to have floated its currents as infants. Soldiers bathed in it, merchants shipped by it, lovers met beside it. It was everything. And like everything in Rome, it changed constantly. You walk down the gently sloping road, past faded murals and sleepy dogs. A delivery boy rushes past on a donkey, yelling, "Clear the way!" to a group of pigeons who absolutely ignore him. At last, the river. The embankment here isn't fancy, just rough stone, patches of wild grass, and a few benches unevenly placed as if the gods themselves couldn't decide where to sit. You choose a spot close to the water, shaded by a plane tree whose leaves rustle with the kind of opinion only old trees possess. The river moves slow this morning, thick, drowsy, green gold in the light. You watch driftwood float past and wonder if it has a destination or just good timing. On the opposite bank, a fisherman mends his net with such focus it feels like prayer. Two children throw pebbles from a ledge and argue about whether ripples count as wishes. You close your eyes. The Tiber smells like wet stone, cold clay, and maybe celery? You don't question it. Fringe tidbit? Romans believed the Tiber had moods. On certain days, it was considered more listening than others. Offerings were left, coins, fruit, occasionally song, to win its favor. One poet claimed he once threw in a poem and the river coughed it back. You decide to test this yourself. You reach into your satchel and pull out the tiny scroll you wrote last week, a short poem about clouds, vinegar, and missing socks. You stand, walk to the edge, and gently set it adrift on the water. It floats. It doesn't sink. It doesn't catch fire. It simply floats. You choose to take that as encouragement. Back on your bench, you let the sun warm your shoulders and the breeze ruffle your hair. Rome, for this brief hour, is generous. And then, a voice behind you. "Early for poetry," says a man, leaning against the same tree. He's older, robes rumpled, sandals uneven, but his eyes sparkle with the kind of joy reserved for retired actors or well-fed philosophers. "Always the best time," you reply. He grins. "What floated?" "Nothing important." "Then it'll reach the gods faster." He sits beside you and pulls out a small flute. Without asking, he begins to play. A slow, meandering tune that matches the curve of the river, the softness of the wind, and the rhythm of your breath. You don't speak again. You just listen. Historians still debate the role of music in everyday Roman life. We know about large-scale performances, of course. Temple hymns, battle marches, Colosseum fanfare. But the quieter music? The street songs, the lullabies, the flute under a tree? those are harder to trace. And yet, here they are. You sit together, two strangers sharing space in a city filled with noise. Eventually, he stops. "I like this spot," he says. "So do I." He rises, nods once, and strolls away with the same pace as the river itself. You watch him disappear around a bend, then look down at your feet. The carved broom charm catches the light. The garum still clinks softly in its jar. And in your heart, a calm hum begins to settle, like a soft bell far in the distance. You stand, brush crumbs from your tunic. When did you eat those? And stretch. There's still daylight left. Still stories waiting around corners. Still pigeons plotting. But for now, the river has said what it needed to say, and you've heard it. You walk slowly away from the river, each step light and smooth, as if the Tiber has lent you its current for a while. The streets of Rome open gently in front of you, their edges softer now, as if they too have been washed by the river's calm. The midday sun is gentler than you expected, warm, not scorching, the kind of light that leans more than it pushes. You decide not to head home just yet. There's a particular courtyard you're thinking of, a quiet place behind a bakery where time tends to forget itself. As you make your way through the narrow lanes, you pass a tall column carved with spiral scenes of soldiers and ships. A group of young scholars sits on its steps, arguing about whether the horses in the top tier are too small or the people too big. One says it's perspective. One says it's laziness. One is clearly here just for the shade. You smile and move on. A nearby stall sells beeswax tablets, erasable noteboards used by students, merchants, and occasionally nosy neighbors. One has a price tag scrawled directly on it. For secrets, shopping, or revenge, try sesterci. Mainstream fact. Romans used wax tablets as everyday writing surfaces. They were the notebooks, calendars, and reminder apps of their time. Paired with a stylus, they allowed messages to be written and then smoothed over and reused. Schools often used them to teach writing, and sometimes, as punishment, to copy boring texts repeatedly. You pause at the stall and pick one up, tracing the soft, amber-colored wax with your thumb. It holds faint impressions from a past message, something about lentils, possibly a bad poem, and what looks like the start of a very passive-aggressive breakup letter. You set it down gently. You round a quiet corner and find the courtyard, just as you remembered. Tucked between a grain warehouse and a tailor's shop, it holds a few crooked benches, a shallow stone fountain shaped like a turtle, and one fig tree so dramatically lopsided it seems to bow when you approach. You sit beneath it. The fountain gurgles gently. A bird hops along the edge, eyeing your satchel. You pat it protectively. Sorry, no snacks today, unless you're into historical condiments. Across the courtyard, a man balances precariously on a stool, trying to hang a painted sign that says, "School of Rhetoric, Mostly Friendly." His ladder looks like it's been borrowed from a chair, and the sign is already missing 2 letters. He hums to himself, oblivious to his own impending doom. You tilt your head and admire the ambition. Fringe tidbit? Rhetoric schools were common in Rome, places where young men, and occasionally very determined young women, learned the fine art of speaking, arguing, and sounding confident, even when making things up. Debates were practiced, voices trained, and metaphors sharpened like blades. Some students became senators. Others became the people who argued about stair repairs at town meetings for the next 50 years. The man on the makeshift ladder finishes his task, steps down triumphantly, and promptly sneezes so hard the sign tilts sideways. He shrugs. Close enough, he mutters. A child peeks out of the tailor's shop and offers him a fig. Negotiations begin. You lean your head back against the fig tree's trunk. It's warm from the sun, its bark dappled with lichen and bits of someone's forgotten note carved decades ago. Livia loves someone but won't say who. A breeze kicks up. A petal from some unknown flower lands on your lap and refuses to leave. The courtyard is so quiet now, you can hear a distant flute. Maybe the same player from the riverbank, maybe someone else entirely. Rome is full of echoes like that, sounds that loop and linger. You begin to wonder whether the whole city is just one continuous tune, played by different hands. Historians still debate the extent of spontaneous public music in Rome. While formal concerts and festivals are well documented, the everyday buskers, home flutists, and humming bakers remain mostly lost to time. Yet graffiti across the city suggests melodies were as common as shadows. You open your satchel, pull out your stylus and wax tablet. Yes, you bought one after all. And write a short sentence. Today the wind sounded like laughter and time. Then below it, do not erase too quickly. You set the tablet aside and let your eyes close. Not to sleep, yet, but to listen more fully. The rustle of leaves, the slap of sandals on cobblestone, a distant donkey braying like it's trying to confess something. You stay in the courtyard until the light turns that honeyed color that means afternoon is trying very hard to become evening. When you finally rise, your legs creak just enough to remind you that you've lived a good day. You brush dust from your tunic, tuck the tablet into your satchel, and nod once. Gratitude. Fig tree. You head down a lane where the walls are painted with faded murals of stars, birds, and what might be a goat juggling apples. It's unclear. Rome rarely explains itself. As you pass the grain warehouse, you overhear a woman explaining to her friend the secret to keeping pigeons off your windowsill. Just tell them your opinions. They'll leave. You note this down mentally. You turn one last corner before home, and there it is, a small chalkboard hanging outside a tavern, updated daily with philosophical musings or just complaints. Today's message reads, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is probably tired of senators." Asterisk. You laugh out loud, and then you walk on. The wind carries the scent of roasted chestnuts, warm stone, and distant storytelling. You smile and follow it home. The walk back to your insula takes longer than usual, not because of crowds or confusion, but because Rome keeps handing you little distractions, the kind you don't resist. At one corner, a pottery vendor is attempting to stack bowls into a tower that clearly violates at least 3 natural laws. A boy on a stool beside him holds a sign that reads, "Guess how high it goes? Win a spoon." You pause, make your guess, 7, and continue on without waiting to see if you're right. You pass a trio of elderly women seated on woven stools, stringing beads into what might be jewelry, or what might be a protest against string. One looks up at you and says, "You have the walk of someone who forgot something important and decided not to care." You nod. She nods. It is an agreement of souls. The city shifts tone once again as you cross into a quieter quarter. Older apartments, shuttered shops, faded banners still fluttering from a long-past festival. The wind moves through with more confidence here. Less asking, more telling. You turn a corner and stop. In front of you rises a familiar structure, one of Rome's lesser forums tucked between neighborhoods. still home to statues whose noses have seen better centuries. A small platform remains in the center, meant once for speeches, now claimed by birds, graffiti, and the occasional dramatic teenager. You wander in. The sun pools lazily in the square. You sit on a stone bench warmed by hours of daylight. Across from you, a statue of a former magistrate appears to be side-eyeing a vine growing up his leg. You remember something you heard once, that Rome has more statues than it has good decisions. Probably true. Mainstream fact. Forums were more than public squares. They were the living rooms of Roman political life. From major centers like the Forum Romanum to small neighborhood forums like this, they hosted markets, trials, elections, and endless debates about drainage systems. They were democracy's playground and bureaucracy's stage. A man appears at the edge of the square, unfurling a scroll with theatrical flair. A small crowd gathers, 10 or 12 people, some with bread in hand, others just eager for distraction. You recognize this. A street orator. He begins his speech with an unnecessary throat clearing, then launches into a spirited monologue about olives, civic virtue, and how the two are tragically misunderstood. He waves his arms, nearly loses his scroll, and misquotes Cicero twice. You're enchanted. Fringe tidbit. Not all Roman orators were trained professionals. Many were self-taught, opinionated, and operated like pop-up podcasts. Some were beloved, others endured. One man in the 2nd century CE gained a following by shouting philosophical riddles near bakeries, then running away before answering them. Today's speaker shouts, "A republic without good bread is merely an idea in sandals." A woman claps. A dog barks. A child drops a fig. You don't entirely follow his logic, but his passion is clear, and passion in Rome is half the currency. Eventually, he bows deeply, trips slightly, and receives a polite scattering of applause. The crowd disperses like sugar in tea. You rise and cross the forum, walking slowly past the weathered stone plinths. Some still bear names: Livius, Cotta, Minucia. Others have been worn blank by time and rain, becoming monuments to the idea of memory, more than to any specific person. You sit again, this time beneath a fig tree whose branches stretch like they're trying to remember something. The light is beginning to shift again. Rome's endless mood lighting. Pale amber now, long shadows, the kind of glow that makes even chipped stone look poetic. Historians still debate the level of true public engagement in these forums. Were speeches influential? Did citizens actually participate, or merely listen with half an ear while eating cheese? The answer, like most things in Rome, is it depends on the cheese. You reach into your satchel and pull out the wax tablet again. The old note still lingers faintly. Wind sounded like time. You flip to a new side and begin writing. He spoke of olives, but meant cities. She clapped, but meant memory. I watched, and meant nothing at all. It's not your best work. But Rome doesn't ask for your best, only your presence. You lean back, letting the stone cradle your spine, letting the forum hum around you. Footsteps, whispers, one distant lute, and the soft flapping of a pigeon trying to land with dignity. A breeze curls around the edge of the square, carrying the scent of baked barley and the distant tang of garum. You smile, remembering the fishy epiphany from days ago. Then, unexpectedly, laughter. Light, quick, unmistakably kind. You glance toward the alley that leads out of the forum. A woman stands there. linen robe, scroll tucked under one arm, eyes still crinkled from laughing. She raises a brow and says, "That man once tried to debate a turnip vendor about taxes." You blink. "I was the turnip vendor." You laugh. "Did you win?" Of course, the turnip helped. You walk together down the alley, casually, without introduction. Rome makes friends like bread makes crumbs, inevitably. She tells you about her job at a record keeper's office. You mention your ongoing attempt to write the world's most underwhelming travel scroll. She offers a fig from her pocket. You accept. Fringe detail. Turnips, as it turns out, were once considered lowly, but also medicinal. A senator once claimed a turnip diet gave him the stamina of Mercury and the digestion of a lion. No one quite believed him. You emerge together near a fountain and part ways without fanfare. Rome doesn't need farewells, just pauses. You head home again, under skies painted rose and copper. Your bones feel warm. Your mind is full. Your heart, just a little bit stretched by fig-sweet conversation. Your insula is just ahead. Inside, the room welcomes you like it always does, with soft shadows, the smell of old parchment, and the comforting creak of furniture that's known your weight too long to judge. You place the wax tablet on the windowsill. The breeze flutters its ribbon, and just before you extinguish the lamp, you whisper, "Let's do all of that again, tomorrow." The next morning arrives like a whisper. No fanfare, no brass from the forum, just the soft cooing of pigeons in an overgrown gutter and the creak of your wooden cot adjusting to your stretch. Rome doesn't shout you awake. It nudges, gently, like a friend who already made breakfast and wants to share. You open one eye. The light is diffused and golden, filtered through the linen curtain beside your window. Dust floats like miniature clouds. Your wax tablet still rests on the ledge, exactly where you left it, the words slightly warped by dew but still legible. Your satchel waits by the door, somehow slightly puffier than yesterday, as if your scrolls multiplied overnight. Typical Roman ambition. You rise slowly, without urgency. Today's goal? No errands, no obligations, just curiosity. As you tie your belt and pull on your sandals, a faint rhythm echoes from somewhere outside. Soft tapping, the kind made by tools, not heels. You know that sound. Construction. You head toward it instinctively. Rome is always building something. Walls, temples, aqueducts, very dramatic arches. Some projects never finish, and no one seems to mind. Others are rebuilt before they're finished, just because someone changed their mind about columns. It's all part of the charm. You turn onto a broad street, where a crew of workers is repairing a section of the city's famous aqueduct system. The half-complete structure looms above the buildings, like a stone centipede marching across rooftops. Its arches cast long morning shadows, and scaffolding is wedged into every crevice like reeds in a lyre. Mainstream fact: Roman aqueducts were an engineering marvel, stone channels and bridges that carried fresh water from distant springs into the heart of the city. Gravity did most of the work, and the math behind the slopes still impresses modern engineers. Rome had over a dozen major aqueducts, supplying baths, fountains, households, even public toilets. One of the workers sees you watching and waves. "You here to help?" He jokes, wiping sweat from his brow and immediately replacing it with dust. "I supervise," you reply. He chuckles. "Then you'll fit right in." You sit on a low wall and observe. Teams of men hoist limestone blocks using pulleys powered by muscle and cleverly placed ropes. A boy rushes around with messages written on wax tablets. A woman sits under a fig tree with a bundle of spare chisels and a scroll open on her lap, part supplier, part poet, it seems. Fringe tidbit. While most Roman engineers were men, records and graffiti suggest women occasionally worked as toolsmiths, suppliers, and even planners, especially in smaller cities or family-run construction efforts. One mosaic even shows a woman holding a compass and overseeing blueprints, her name lost, but her brow clearly furrowed. You watch one of the engineers use a device that looks like a cross between a sundial and a toy, the chorobates, used to measure horizontal alignment. He mutters to himself, makes an adjustment, then nods with the self-satisfaction of someone who has just told gravity what to do. You walk closer. Is it working? You ask. He raises an eyebrow. It's aligning with the sun and the gods. If it's wrong, blame one of them. You nod solemnly. I'll start with the sun. He smiles and returns to work. Behind him, the aqueduct rises, tall, precise, oddly graceful. The water inside moves invisibly, but the sound is there if you listen. A hush, a murmur, the sigh of a city's thirst being gently quenched. You find a shaded spot on a nearby bench and sit, letting the scene unfold like a play with too many subplots. A worker falls from a short ladder, lands on a sack of hay, and declares himself a hero. Someone brings a clay jug of water, and everyone drinks from it without questioning whose turn it is. A baby toddles into the work site and is promptly handed a small hammer, wooden, you hope, while its mother retrieves it with a smile that says, "Not again." Historians still debate the level of Roman maintenance on aqueducts. While impressive in design, some systems fell into disrepair due to politics, mismanagement, or budget discussions that involved a lot of sighing. One aqueduct was famously repaired by a private citizen who got tired of walking uphill with buckets. You deeply respect that level of spite. The woman under the fig tree waves you over. "I've seen you writing things down," she says. "You one of those scroll people?" You consider this. "I write mildly interesting things, sometimes in complete sentences." She nods. "Perfect. Write this one down. A broken chisel doesn't mean the wall wins." You smile and do exactly that. She hands you a spare fig. You eat it. It is perfect. As the sun climbs higher, the work slows. Tools rest against stones. Water jugs are refilled, and most of the crew finds shade under whatever will hold them. You stay a little longer, listening to the conversations around you. Debates about arches, gripes about chisels, a surprisingly in-depth argument about whether goats or donkeys are better at construction supervision. You decide it's time to go before someone hands you something heavy. On your way out, you pass a column inscribed with faint markings. Someone, years ago, carved a message into the stone. Water flows. So must we. You pause to trace it gently, wondering if the original carver ever knew how right they were. You return to the street, warmed by sun, fig, and the feeling of having witnessed something simple and sacred. People building something that will outlast them, but still complaining about lunch. The city hums on. You follow its rhythm, not because you have a destination, just because Rome moves, and you're lucky enough to move with it. By mid-afternoon, the city leans into stillness. Shadows stretch longer. Voices hush instinctively. Even the pigeons seem to take slower steps, as if respecting Rome's daily pause. It's the hour when time itself reclines on a stone bench and unbuckles its sandals. You, of course, are still walking, but with no hurry, no errands, just curiosity. A breeze carries the distant scent of roasted chickpeas and something faintly floral. Maybe lavender? Maybe a neighboring street's favorite soap maker just started boiling her next batch. You turn a corner and find yourself on a street you've never taken before. It curves gently uphill, shaded by ancient cypress trees that lean toward one another like old friends whispering gossip. The homes here are older, quieter, with doors that creak proudly and shutters that always seem slightly ajar. At the top of the hill stands a modest building with faded paint, a gently sagging roof, and a sign etched in careful Latin, Domus Herbaria, Remedies and Rumors. You pause, then knock. A voice calls from inside. If you're selling fish, turn around. If you're cursed, come in. You open the door. The shop is cooler than the outside, with thick stone walls and windows just small enough to keep the heat out, but still let in slanted sunlight. Bundles of herbs hang from wooden beams. Rosemary, mint, fennel, something that might be basil or might be confidence. The air smells like a recipe, a prayer, and someone's well-kept secret. Behind the counter stands a woman of indeterminate age, with ink-stained fingers and a loose braid threaded with little brass charms. She doesn't look up. She's grinding something with intense focus and possibly vengeance. Mainstream fact: Roman herbalists played a crucial role in everyday healthcare. Before there were doctors in togas, and even after, there were women and men who specialized in natural remedies. Garlic poultices for fevers, fig sap for warts, vinegar tinctures for everything else. Some kept shops, others worked out of homes. Most knew things you wouldn't dare question. You approach the counter and nod a quiet greeting. She finally looks up. "You've got city dust in your eyebrows," she says. You raise your brows. Dust falls. "Thought so," she mutters. You ask if she has anything for tired feet, distracted thoughts, and the creeping suspicion that you might never finish your scroll. She considers. "For the feet, I recommend a peppermint soak. For the thoughts, lemon balm. For the scroll, try wine." She disappears into a back room, leaving you to wander. Shelves line the walls, filled with jars labeled in tidy handwriting. Juniper for clarity. Mugwort for dreams. Dried laughter, mostly real. A bowl near the window holds smooth river stones, each painted with a single word. Wait. Forget. Almost. You take one labeled soften. She returns and hands you a small cloth pouch. Herbs for the foot bath. Add warm water and one good thought. You raise an eyebrow. "If you can't think of a good thought," she says, "borrow one." You thank her and start to pay, but she waves you off. You look like someone who's been listening more than talking. That's payment enough. Fringe tidbit: some Roman herbalists doubled as informal therapists. They listened. They remembered. They whispered suggestions that sounded like stories. A few were even known to prescribe poetry, reciting verses while sipping warm herb tea. The line between healer and storyteller was always wonderfully blurry. You exit the shop, pouch in hand, and descend the hill slowly. The view stretches before you. Terracotta roofs, rising columns, and the lazy, glinting thread of the Tiber. As you reach the base, the wind shifts again. This time it carries something unmistakable. beeswax, ink, and the faint burn of overcooked parchment. You grin. A library. Sure enough, a few steps later, you see it. A public reading hall, its front doors flung open as if mid-yawn. A chalkboard outside reads, "Today's topic, why Cicero probably wouldn't have liked you." You step inside. The air is cool and dry. Wooden shelves line the walls, filled with scrolls wrapped tightly and sorted by category. History, philosophy, recipes, often misplaced, and miscellaneous curiosities, which you make a mental note to explore. In the back, a few scribes dip quills into ink and whisper to one another about footnotes. A man leans against a column, reading aloud to no one, practicing for a crowd that may or may not arrive. You find a seat near the window and pick up a scroll labeled, "On Minor Roman Celebrations." Historians still debate the purpose of some lesser-known festivals. There were hundreds, honoring everything from wolves to vegetables to the concept of hinges. Some, like Carmentalia, a festival for childbirth and prophecy, were deeply respected. Others, like Fornicalia, the oven festival, seemed to be excuses to gossip and burn things, not necessarily in that order. You skim a passage about Vinalia Rustica, a festival for wine and weather, where citizens offered grapes to Jupiter in exchange for better weather. A footnote adds that many participants simply drank until the weather no longer mattered. You chuckle. Outside the window, a dog dozes in the shade of a statue. The statue appears to be watching the dog, mildly impressed by its dedication to rest. You stay a little longer in the library, not reading, just existing among the quiet rustle of parchment and the occasional sneeze from the dustiest corner. When you finally leave, the sun has shifted again, casting the city in that deep, glowing light that turns stone to honey and windows to gold. You head home by instinct, feet lighter, thoughts quieter. At your door, you pause and smile. You now have a scroll, a satchel, a wax tablet, a broom charm, a fig memory, and a pouch of herbs meant to restore your feet and focus. More importantly, you carry the soft weight of a city that lets you wander without needing a reason. You enter, and as the door closes behind you, the scent of the herb pouch rises like a gentle reminder to soften, to steep, to write, or to rest. You choose both. That evening, you decide not to write. Not yet. Instead, you prepare the foot soak as instructed, warm water, the herb pouch, and one good thought. After some consideration, you choose the memory of that flute melody by the river. Simple, wandering, just slightly out of tune. You sit beside the basin, feet submerged, steam curling into the air like a sigh from the floor itself. The scent is sharp and sweet, peppermint, lemon balm, something vaguely resembling cinnamon and confidence. You breathe in slowly, and again. The world slows. Outside, the city is shifting once more into its nighttime rhythm. Less chatter, more murmurs, less motion, more candlelight. Rome after dusk is a softer creature, lit by oil lamps and laughter behind windows. Your own window flickers with the warm amber glow of a single lamp. Your wax tablet rests nearby, beside a small dish of olives and a slice of bread you honestly don't remember placing there. But that's Rome. Sometimes the city gives you things just because you looked like you needed them. You nibble at the bread, dip an olive into oil, and listen. Somewhere, someone is singing. Not loudly, not professionally, just a quiet tune, probably older than the empire itself. winding down the alleyways like a lazy breeze. You close your eyes. Mainstream fact: Romans often sang to pass time. Slaves sang during work, children sang in games, and bathhouses were full of echoing melodies. Singing was woven into every layer of life, not just performance, but function. To soothe, to distract, to pass messages. You hum along, not knowing the words. You don't need to. Eventually, your feet wrinkle, your herbs cool, and your good thought stretches out into a kind of full-body exhale. You dry off and tuck yourself into your cot. Not to sleep, not yet. Tonight still holds one more secret. You reach under your pillow and pull out a small folded note. It's not yours. You found it days ago, tucked into a niche in the forum wall, where people leave offerings and tiny anonymous wisdoms. You'd meant to return it, but it stayed. You open it now. It reads, "If the city ever feels too big, walk slower. It will adjust." You read it again, then smile. Outside, the stars begin to gather, not in armies, not in rows, but in a scattered, sleepy assembly. Fringe tidbit: ancient Romans believed in Sidus Natalis, a star that governed your fate, visible only to those who knew where to look. Not quite astrology, not quite science, just a personal constellation, waiting patiently. You wonder what yours looks like. You get up and walk to the roof. Your building isn't tall, just high enough to see a sliver of the Tiber, the rooftops of distant bathhouses, and the flicker of lamps from windows too far to identify. The stars above twinkle through thin city haze, not dazzling, but present. You pick one, not the brightest, just one that seems still. You imagine it's your Sidus Natalis, quiet, steady, slightly late. You sit on the roof ledge, your legs swinging gently, and think about the city breathing beneath you. All those sleeping heads, all those nighttime thoughts, some dreaming of battles, others of bread, maybe one dreaming of you as you are now, still, unbothered, almost invisible in the hush. Historians still debate how widespread personal stargazing was in ancient Rome. Astrology was popular, yes, but for emperors and generals, the simple practice of watching stars without needing prophecy, that belonged more to poets and insomniacs. And maybe you. Below, a dog barks once, then gives up. A cart rumbles down a side road. A couple walks past arguing quietly about soup. You let it all drift through you like notes in an unfinished song. You stretch out on the warm rooftop tiles, staring up, wax tablet balanced on your chest. You write one final line: "I am not lost, just loosely arranged." And then you close your eyes. Not to dream, just to listen to the city's pulse. The soft heartbeat of stone and memory. The rhythm of footsteps past and present. The long, quiet sentence that is Rome. You fall asleep there, under stars that might be watching, beside a broom charm that no longer needs to sweep anything away. When you wake, the sky is the color of old parchment, soft, faded, and creased with the early light of dawn. Birds chatter like gossiping scribes. Somewhere, a rooster tries and fails to sound authoritative. You're still on the rooftop. Your wax tablet has slipped off your chest and now rests in a shallow puddle of dew. The line you wrote, "I am not lost, just loosely arranged," is smudged, half evaporated, now more poem than sentence. You sit up slowly, stretching limbs that are only mildly offended by your impromptu sleepover with the stars. Below you, the city stirs in slow motion, windows opening, bread ovens firing up, sandals slapping quietly on stone. You smile. There's a calmness to Rome in the early morning that feels older than the stones themselves, like the city exhales between its performances. You head downstairs, wash your face in a chipped clay basin, and wrap your satchel over one shoulder. Time to walk again. Not for anything urgent, just because that's what you do now. You take a different route today, through the Aventine, one of Rome's quieter hills. The streets here are lined with cypress and tall walls, hiding gardens you can only imagine. The occasional aristocrat wanders past with a tunic so white it threatens the sun. A boy herds 2 goats who seem largely unimpressed with his authority. You turn down a quiet path and find it, the Aqua Virgo, one of the oldest aqueducts still in use. Water trickles gently into a stone basin flanked by worn statues, one of a nymph, the other of a man who looks like he lost a bet with a toga. Mainstream fact: the Aqua Virgo was completed in 19 BCE and famously brought water into the heart of Rome with such precision that it's still functional in parts today. Agrippa, the emperor's right-hand man, oversaw its construction. Its name, Virgo, comes from a legend about a young girl showing engineers the spring that would become its source. You cup your hands in the fountain and drink. The water is shockingly cold, perfectly clean. You whisper thank you to the nymph, just in case. From there, you stroll toward the Field of Mars, Rome's open space of leisure, training, and unofficial dog meetups. It's early, so only a few people are about. 2 runners arguing about sandals, an old philosopher shouting at a tree, perhaps rehearsing, and a woman sketching the skyline in charcoal, her scroll already smudged with ambition. Fringe tidbit? The Campus Martius once hosted military exercises, but over time became a public park of sorts, used for festivals, parades, and occasional spontaneous dance competitions, we think. It was where senators could be seen in their natural habitat, pacing, plotting, and pretending they didn't forget someone's name. You sit under a laurel tree and listen to the city stretch. Bells chime from a nearby temple. Somewhere a child giggles uncontrollably, chased by nothing but joy. You eat a plum from your satchel, sweet, messy, glorious. As you rest, a man approaches. He's older, with a beard shaped like a wave and eyes that squint permanently from too much squinting. You look like someone who watches, he says. You nod. I used to be a map maker, he continues, sitting beside you uninvited. But not of geography, of people. I'd draw where people tend to go, where conversations like to linger, where secrets hide. You raise an eyebrow. He smiles. You'd be surprised how often secrets hang out near fountains. He pulls out a scroll and shows you a mess of lines and dots. This is yesterday, he says proudly. A lovely cluster near the fig vendor. Something was happening. You nod again, not because you understand, but because he clearly does. Historians still debate the level of data collection in ancient Rome. While official censuses and tax rolls were meticulous, the informal collection of movement, behavior, and daily rhythms is harder to trace. But evidence suggests some scribes, philosophers, and bored civil servants kept personal logs of what they saw, what we might call soft maps of human nature. The mapmaker rises and says, if you ever find yourself in a place where time slows, mark it. That's where meaning hides. You promise to remember. He disappears behind a statue that might be Mars, or someone pretending to be Mars. You stand, stretch, and decide to walk the long way home, past the Temple of Janus, whose doors remain closed in times of peace, past a mural half faded into mystery, past a bakery where the baker hums the same melody you heard days ago. The city wraps around you like a loose toga, imperfect, comfortable, and entirely yours. When you reach your insula, you pause at the threshold. You pull out your wax tablet. New side. One line. I found stillness where the world forgot to hurry. You go inside, not for rest, but to write. Something long, something slow, something about a city with 1,000 voices and one river that remembers them all. Your room is quiet. The lamp flickers softly in the corner, and your wax tablet lies in your lap, half filled with lines that tilt slightly to the left, like the words themselves are leaning back, relaxing into the page. You sit cross-legged on the floor, a cushion beneath you, a slice of cheese balanced precariously on the edge of your windowsill, and a faint breeze curling in through the open shutters. Outside, the street hums with that low, almost musical rhythm of evening Rome, the clatter of plates, a vendor calling last olives in a voice that suggests he'll repeat it 5 more times, the fading ring of metal being struck, not from a battle, but a blacksmith putting away his tools. You listen, you write, you pause, bite the cheese, then write again. No urgency, no agenda, just memory curling into narrative like steam into air. The story you're crafting doesn't have an ending yet. That's fine. Rome doesn't either. You rise and move to the shelf where you keep scrolls. Most are blank. Some are half filled with half ideas. One is labeled Things to Ask the River and contains exactly 3 questions. Why do you shimmer differently at night? Do the fish talk? Have you ever heard someone cry quietly on your bank? You run your fingers over the parchment, then over your broom charm, which now hangs gently beside your window like a punctuation mark. Rome tonight is unusually gentle, the air cooler, the stones warmer. Even the pigeons seem to roost with a little more intention. You sit by the window and gaze across the rooftops. A few lamps still flicker. A few figures walk, not hurried. You spot a child carefully setting a bowl of water outside her door, for the gods or for the neighborhood cat. Possibly both. Mainstream fact: Roman households often included small shrines called Lararia, devoted to household gods, spirits of ancestors, hearth, luck. Offerings ranged from wine to fruit to whispered hopes. Some families performed daily rituals. Others simply nodded to the shrine on their way out the door. You light a small oil lamp on your own shelf and whisper. Not a prayer, not really. More like a thank you for figs, for quiet corners, for days that meander. And then, because you're in Rome, you whisper again, just in case the gods were on a break the first time. A knock on your door, not loud. A gentle single tap. You open it. The woman from the turnip vendor story stands there. She's holding a bundle wrapped in linen. Herbs, she says. For sleep. You looked like someone who might need a better ending. You nod. She smiles. Use hot water, or dreams. She leaves before you can thank her. You set the bundle down, then open it. Lavender, chamomile, crushed fennel, a hint of something sweet, maybe honeycomb or thyme. You pour hot water, let it steep, and watch the herbs bloom and swirl. Then, cup in hand, You return to your wax tablet and write your final sentence of the day. Even here in the City of Echoes, silence sometimes finds you first. You smile. You stretch. You lie down, finally, deeply, on the woven mat that somehow became more comfortable the longer you lived here. The breeze strokes your cheek. A distant flute plays. Or maybe it's the wind whistling past your shutters. Fringe tidbit. Some Roman insulae had pipes built into the walls, not for water, but to carry sound from one apartment to another. Historians argue whether it was an early communication system, an architectural flaw, or a prank by someone named Marcus with too much free time. You roll onto your side and let the city blur. All the conversations, all the footsteps, all the quietly smudged scrolls and crooked signs and rooftop naps. All the Rome that welcomed you, not for who you were, but for how slowly you walked. And now the city sleeps. Not entirely, not all at once, but piece by piece, room by room, dream by dream. The shutters creak once, then still. The street below softens to footsteps you can no longer hear. The stars gather like listeners. The moon hums low. And the stones, those old, tired stones, finally exhale. Your breath slows to match theirs. Long in, longer out. The kind of breath that's half memory, half forgiveness. Your fingers relax. Your shoulders soften. Your jaw unclenched. Even your thoughts begin to walk slower. You don't need to think about aqueducts or olives or broom charms now. Let the stories rest. Let the sounds of the river return to the river. Let the words you didn't write stay unbothered. You are not expected anywhere. There are no speeches to give. No maps to draw, no gods to impress, only this moment, only this stillness, only the warm weight of a city that has nothing left to prove. So breathe in again. And as you exhale, let go of every dusty stone, every winding alley, every almost forgotten name. You're safe here, you're home here. You're allowed to rest. The story will wait for you. Sweet dreams.